we're going to talk today about overcoming barriers to achieving your energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals. We are going to do that by first identifying barriers. So we have an early breakout room today that we're going to put you into. You're going to identify barriers to your energy and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And we have a worksheet for you to do that on. You'll have gotten that by email, but Helen will also put a link to the worksheet in the chat so you can download it now. Then we will talk about strategies for overcoming barriers, proven strategies that we know work to do this. And then you will be working on your action plan. After you work with us on your barriers and then hear about strategies for overcoming those barriers, the same worksheet will be one that you can use to develop your action plan for reducing those barriers. Just a reminder for people who are just showing up, again, we love it when you have your organizational name in your name, your Zoom name. We also love it when your camera's on. I like seeing your faces, and we know that other people will be more engaged with you and learn more from you, and you can learn more when the camera's on. And please do use the chat. Jay and Augie are busy answering questions there in real time, and they will be as we go through this presentation. So the strategies that I mentioned there are going to be largely drawn from strategic energy management. Strategic energy management is an application of the plan, do, check, act cycle, which is a proven system for continuous improvement as well as reducing barriers. It can help you to put sustainable energy practices into your normal operations. As I say, it's proven, and I'll show some statistics later on how it has been proven to enact change. You can reduce your costs with it. It does lead to enhanced competitiveness for the people who are using this system, either for strategic energy management or with other management systems. And if you're worried about regulatory or market risks, it's a system that will help with that as well. So it's a system for reducing barriers, and I hope that through understanding that we are applying a system for reducing barriers, you see, or you start to get the kind of the nature of the barriers we're aiming to reduce. We're not talking about, fixing something about a current lighting project that's ongoing, but looking at reducing your systemic organizational barriers. Now, as I said, we're doing an early breakout room to start looking at those barriers. Helen is going to push a button. You are going to get an invitation to go to a breakout room, so you have a better ratio of coaches to participants, where you can work with your coach to identify your barriers. You just have to click the join button when she gives you that invitation. So I want you to be ready to do that. Before you get that invitation, I'm going to tell you what you're going to be doing in that breakout room. So you're going to use the worksheet. So hang on, sorry, I forgot to check in on the more Menti answers here, and feel free to populate this with more Menti answers. So we've got not just cost savings now, but also emissions reduction. That's great. Those are the two things that are in the title of this workshop. Also reducing life cycle costs, important, and it's actually really connected to strategic energy management. So thank you for those answers. So sorry for not checking in on that earlier, but it'll be there, and I'll leave it there as I tell you what you're going to be doing in this breakout room. So get ready for the instructions so that you know what you're doing there. You're going to use, as I said, this worksheet. The worksheet that's on the screen now. Again, you can download this from the chat. There's a link that Helen will have posted. You're going to do that, and you're going to work with your coaches to think about the organizational barriers that you're facing and document those in the sheet. All right. That everyone should get one barrier, and then we can switch to the coach helping other people to identify their barriers. We probably won't have time to work one-on-one with every person to identify a barrier for every person. So if your barriers are not the ones being discussed at any time, still listen in on the conversation and see if you hear whether the barriers being discussed are ones that you think are applicable for you. If you hear that and you find like, okay, that's my barrier, documented there, make sure you get at least one barrier out of this breakout room because later you're going to work on the action plan. For now, though, just the barriers. And if you don't get that one-on-one attention you need, feel free to connect with your coach afterwards and set an appointment or make a call so that you can get the one-on-one coaching that you need. All right. So again, just for clarity, you're going to use that worksheet. You're going to work with coaches. You're going to identify the organizational barriers that you are facing. Now it's time for Helen to push that button. In my breakout room, we hit on a lot of good barriers, a lot of actionable ones. I hope the same is true for you. We are going to now go into talking about strategic energy management and how it can address these barriers. So again, strategic energy management is based on the plan, do, check, act cycle that you will have probably some familiarity with, if not through SEM, then through other management systems. It drives success because it addresses barriers. So we've just identified barriers, and what we're going to do today is look at specifically how this cycle is applied to strategic energy management and how that can help you reduce your barriers. So, what is that? What am I talking about? What's strategic energy management? Well, I can break it into 6 components for you here. And they are management commitment, planning, monitoring and reporting, opportunity identification, implementation, operational integration, and employee engagement. And I think that in my breakout room, we touched on every one of these components of SEM in the barriers that we discussed, or like the barriers we discussed could be addressed by a selection of these barriers. Now, those are the components that we would use to describe SEM, and I'm going to go into some detail about what they all are. But first, I just want to make sure that you see that SEM is not like this list of components. We didn't just make this up. SEM has been in the market for quite a while, long enough to have been studied, and there are papers that demonstrate that it can get you savings faster versus not using it, and it can take those savings higher and make them last longer going further. Some people can get up to 20% savings by using the SEM model just through low-cost opportunities. And what I think is super appealing here is typically what you see in the studies from SEM applications is that it will produce a 2.5 to 3.5% continued sustained annual reduction. So if you have a carbon target that says we got to get down 30% in the next 10 years, you can't afford to not take advantage of something that's going to give you 2.5 to 3.5% savings. And in fact, if it does deliver all of that and it translates into equivalent greenhouse gas savings, it will be a major component of you hitting that target. And some people have even more ambitious carbon targets. So again, you just can't afford to not take advantage of applying a strategic energy management model. So let's get into those components. The first of them is management commitment. I put it at the top of the list because we have seen in Ontario and outside of Ontario that a lack of management commitment is the number one cause of failure for energy management efforts. So if you don't have that, it's a real issue, and maybe you might want to put it on your worksheet as a barrier. When we talk about management commitment, we're talking about an endorsement from top management all the way down through to the energy manager and to the rest of your organization of an energy policy that includes clear commitments, clear targets. It also includes making sure that not just financial, but also the people power, the human resources are committed to working on energy issues and making the savings that you need to make. As well, making sure there's an energy team in place because nobody can address energy strategically on their own. It is always a team effort. And then also assignment from management to everyone to make sure that everyone knows they have responsibility for energy performance. Just like you can't do it on your own and you need an energy team, you also need your whole workforce behind the energy conservation goals of the organization. In fact, actually that came up in my breakout session. So a little story about management commitment and what it can look like. This is a story from Daniela Parashiv. She is a Save on Energy award-winning energy manager. We are looking at a picture of the Frank McKechnie Community Center, and that is Canada's first municipal facility to be certified ISO 50001. So she is doing amazing things, but she is only able to do that because she has received initially management commitment and leveraged that management commitment to continually improve, or sorry, to continually increase the trust that she has. She uses the word trust in the quotation here. So she got her initial management commitment when she started as an energy manager. She used it to get results. She showed the value of those results, and then leveraged that value to get more commitment, more trust, then used the additional resources to do even better work, and got into a kind of virtuous cycle of continuous improvement where she now is at this point that she can get 50001 certified building and set records in Canada. So she would have had a huge problem if she did not have that initial kernel of management commitment. If you don't have that, you should be listing that as a barrier. She also would have had a problem if she didn't continue to show value to increase management commitment over time, but she did, and hopefully you can do the same to get the management commitment you need for SEM. From there, we would go to planning. Planning is really important. It starts with targets. If you don't have targets, you don't really know where you're going, and so there can't really be a plan. Once you have targets, you want to have a solid energy management plan, and we've got a good template from Save on Energy that you can use for that if that is lacking. Then from there, you want to conduct analysis at a high level to make sure that the different opportunities you have to save energy receive a prioritization and you know what to do next. And also even the components of strategic energy management are prioritized for you. Then you can't, it's tough to do this if you don't identify where you have big uses of energy and address those, because if you're only addressing the smaller ones, your savings will be small. And you also should be looking at yourself critically and how you're doing energy management and assessing energy management practices. We've got a course where you can do that. It's a self-serve online course on our learning platform. It gives you a score on how you're doing in energy management practices and can even help you identify the immediate high-value actions that will increase that score so your energy management can get more strategic. This story about planning comes from the city of Toronto, where they had a high-level strategic plan for decarbonization with very ambitious targets. And one of the problems they had is that having that plan in place, they knew that they were very reliant on heat pumps, but they had a heat pump that really wasn't functioning the way that it should have. And it was causing cynicism among the staff towards that technology. So people were losing confidence in the high-level plan. Fortunately, they also had facility level plans. And so they knew that the way to solve this was to collect data on the site, figure out what that meant and how to narrow down the problems based on the data, solve the problems that they couldn't solve, and then use the remaining data to show that they were justified in bringing in specialists to solve the rest of the problem. That's exactly what they did. This facility is now working well, and people can now be confident that heat pumps can function to hit their higher level strategic goals. So they've got plans at multiple levels, and solving their problems would take more time if their plans were not there. So they really couldn't afford to not have this plan due to how ambitious their targets were. If you've got targets that you need to hit, I would say the same thing. You can't afford to not have a plan. So those are two components. I talked about planning and management commitment. I want you to use the Zoom raise your hand function. If in discussing these or hearing about these things, you're starting to think, I feel like there are a few more barriers that I could note on my worksheet. If there are things coming up for you that are barriers that we didn't identify in your breakout room, and if you want to talk about what those barriers are, feel free to put them in the chat if you want to get specific about it. Okay, so you can have more than one barrier on your worksheet in that box. What we'll do when we get to action planning is just pick the most important one. I'm hoping that if you don't have really solid management commitment and really solid planning, you've seen a few more barriers that you could add. Now, I don't see the hands. Are any hands coming, like, any hands coming up? Producers? No? Robert, okay, Robert's got one. Great. All right. So, all right, let's move on. Sorry, when I say I don't see the hands, I don't mean to say nobody's raising them. I just think in my view that I'm looking at in Zoom right now, I might not see them. But anyway, let's move on to other components of strategic energy management. Monitoring and reporting. You know, data was something that came up in my breakout room. RedScreen is a great tool for this. You can use whatever tools you have on hand. So monitoring and reporting means that you will have a plan for collecting all of the data that you need. You will have KPIs so that you can see if the trends in the data that you collect are going the way you want them to go. You'll have analytical protocols so that any processing of data that you collect happens and you can clearly see the trends again towards those KPIs. It means that you're not going to fool yourself into thinking you're saving energy just because there's been a mild winter or a mild summer, because you're normalizing your energy data against drivers. And then you have to be reporting, right? The second part of monitoring and reporting is reporting. If you're an energy manager and you're the only one that sees the data, that's not enough. Your people, your energy team, people you're responsible to need to see this data. And then there needs to be a connection, a mechanism that connects the trends that you see to action. If you're not going on the right track, you know, what are the protocols for dealing with that and making sure that your energy savings get back to where they should be. So Chris Shilton is an energy manager for City Housing Hamilton. He's here today, and I talked to him about monitoring and reporting and the importance of that at City Housing Hamilton. He told me when he first started, and still today, and every time, all the time in between, he regularly gets a question from his board, what have we saved? And it's a lot easier to ask that than it is to answer, especially when he first started and there just wasn't data for him. He had targets, but he didn't even know, you know, where he was standing. So it was hard to know whether he would hit those targets. So one of his first big focuses as an energy manager was setting up monitoring and collecting data. He now has a RedScreen model for every building in his portfolio, and it's all packaged well in the portfolio feature within RedScreen. And so now when people ask, what have you saved? It's really easy for him to answer. He can get that to them. And he's built trust to the point that the building we're looking at on this slide is a City Housing Hamilton building that is the world's largest passive house retrofit. If he wasn't able to show the value by monitoring and reporting, he would never get the authority to do this kind of, record-setting project. The fourth component of strategic energy management that I want to talk about is opportunity identification and implementation. So of course, you've got to have projects to do, and you've got to find projects to do that will save energy. And this can look like energy hunts and technical assessments and audits. Usually that is part of somebody's strategic energy management, but it doesn't have to stop there. You can have a broad definition for your, or broad documentation on your process that helps you identify and act on opportunities. So you can also include things like taking suggestions from vendors or employees, and there are all kinds of ways that I'm sure you've all found different opportunities. Now, identification is one side of it. Implementation is really aided by prioritization and status updates. So you need to just not just have a list of projects, but you need to have a tool, and we can provide you with one if you don't have it, that helps you figure out which projects are the important ones to do now, and which projects are underway, which projects are done, so that you know what to do next. Utilities Kingston's story around opportunity identification is a great one. Within their portfolio, they have the Ravensview wastewater facility. And the problem was they just didn't know what to do there. They didn't have enough opportunities identified there. So they did an energy hunt, and it was a really data-driven energy hunt. So a lot of analysis went into it up front. And then they worked with facilities staff to marry what they were seeing in the data to what they were seeing on the shop floor. or the facility floor. And the opportunity they found, some of them could be implemented and were implemented that week. And they also built up a list of years worth of projects that they could continue to do. So now there are plenty of opportunities and lots of projects scheduled for this facility to save energy. Hugh McLaren, the energy manager there, said that it was an incredible experience and he would recommend it to everyone. So we've seen two more components of strategic energy management. And now I'd love to see your Zoom hands come up if you're not just thinking about more barriers, but if you're starting to mentally connect barriers to actions that you can take. We've seen lots of stories of actions that people have taken to implement strategic energy management components. Okay, now look, I've changed my view. I can see hands coming up. That's great. All right. I'm glad to see that we're translating this into action. And if you want to talk about your specific actions, again, throw those into the chat. Jay and Augie would be happy to talk to you about them in real time. I'm going to tell you the last two components of strategic energy management. One of them is operational integration. It is, I think, the most overlooked component of SEM, but it is really, really important because what it means is changing your SOPs for day-to-day operations to include energy efficiency. And of course, when you do that, because not everyone looks at their SOPs every day, when you change them, you need to have active communication about the fact that you have included energy efficiency in the SOPs and people need to be doing things differently. Another element of operational integration is building energy efficiency considerations into your systems for procurement and design so that new equipment and new systems are designed with energy efficiency in mind and they don't get in the door if they're not efficient. You also can do things like make sure that your scheduling, especially your maintenance scheduling, is set up to optimize for energy performance. And all of these things and every component of operational integration needs to have some review mechanism so that you know that people didn't just read the SOP, but they're actually doing the thing that you want them to do that might be different from what they were doing before. Maple Leaf Foods, Behzad, I hope Behzad is here today. Again, I can't see everybody right now, but I hope Behzad is here. He's the energy manager at Maple Leaf Foods. He did a great operational project. He had a refrigerated space that was right next to a room temperature space. There was no door, and he had calculated that they were losing 137 megawatt hours of chilled air just flowing through that door. But it was a high traffic doorway. So he couldn't just put up a door. He actually went and consulted with his facilities staff and figured out, what's the best kind of door for this? How could we control it so that it opens when you need to? And, what's something that will work as a procedure for us operationally? And so they figured out what to do. They did put that door there. They're now saving that 137 megawatt hours. And as a bonus, because that door is so close to a punch clock, the staff is not getting chills every time they go to finish or start their shift. And that's not just an operational improvement. That's an instance of employee engagement because Behzad did it with the help and support of his facility staff. So employee engagement means that everyone knows, everyone in your organization knows about the culture of energy efficiency that you're building. And you want to make sure that you're focusing your engagements based on the audience. So you're going to engage management differently and maybe with different timing than the facility staff, operations staff, other people that are working within your organization. But if you can involve everyone and be getting ideas from everyone, then that can become a huge source of savings that actually you don't have to work too hard on because other people are bringing it to you. And especially when you get ideas from other people, but also when you do, major projects and get things done, celebrating success is a huge part of what can engage people because it associates energy management with good outcomes and maybe pizza and parties. We got a story on that from Cameco. This is from Yana Jamnicki. She's also an award-winning energy manager. She was doing she was an early adopter of a lot of great energy management practices. But when she first started, people didn't really know what she was doing. They didn't know why they should help her when she asked. But she kept presenting to everyone and making sure that all employees knew about the value that she was creating with energy management. And eventually it sunk in. She walked by kind of a dark garage like the one you see in the picture. And she first thought there was an accident that had cut the power, but it turned out that people had just shut the lights off for the weekend because they had taken her messaging on board. And she noted that as a kind of a watershed moment. And after that, the whole staff was helping her and things just got a lot easier and savings were compiling from her employee engagement. Okay, now, those are the 6 elements of strategic energy management. They're on your worksheet. We're going to go back into a breakout room to now work on action plans. Okay, so you're going to get that same invitation and you're going to click the join button. But again, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do in the breakout room before we go. All right, you're going to work with your coach as you did previously, but the work might be a little more in depth because we're going to have to iron out what your actions are going to be in the context of strategic energy management to identify, to address the barriers that you identified previously. So you're going to document those actions on your worksheet in this session. Again, probably not everyone will have time to get one-on-one time with their coach in this, but pay attention and hopefully you can contribute or suggest actions that you may have taken in the past to your fellow energy managers. So, get involved in the conversation. And again, if we can't address or get a good list of actions for you today, that'll be okay because you have access to us, your coaches. You can make appointments with us afterwards and we can work with you one-on-one. Almost guaranteed we're not going to get to work with everybody, but we want to. And we want you to have your action plan. So let's do that. Let's go to the breakout room. Did any of the other coaches, I know what happened in my breakout room. Anybody else want to talk about what happened in their breakout room?
We had some really good conversation around, accessing capital for that. And a lot of that ties back to management commitment. And we talked about how we can use data and measurement and verification to build confidence in the results, making sure you are talking the language that management cares about, not kilowatt hours, but, bottom line, competitiveness, patient care, risk of utility costs in the future, going forward with that. When we also touched on some of the challenges around getting data and getting useful data to inform your decisions, to use in that reporting to management, and some of the challenge of, the importance of building relationships with utilities so you can get that data, get access to that data. And also, I think we sort of ran out a bit of time on that, but also, platforms or tools to start collecting that data, either aggregating it across your sites for multi-site or, EMIS type systems that will collect that data within your facility if you're looking at data at different sort of areas or systems.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Augie, any other?
Yeah, for sure. We had a lively discussion for sure. There was a pretty wide spectrum of items or barriers to choose from. Tried to kind of cluster them, but the one that we got into was the kind of general deprioritization of energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emission efforts as a result of the pandemic. So priorities being placed on whether or not it's production or health and safety, right? Not that sort of thing. So we really kind of dug into that and spoke a lot about how basically like management commitment, but monitoring and reporting is really important to kind of get some of that management commitment. We ended up going down this road of actually crowdsourcing all of the good things that one would do to help identify energy opportunities that you can then report on and build management commitment, build business cases out of, into actually kind of mapping out what an energy hunt charter looks like. And the energy managers on the call had some really great tips on how to actually structure a hunt and identify those opportunities, start building a pipeline of projects, putting in some monitoring and reporting and opening the eyes of the organization of what is being left out by the deprioritization effort. So it was an exercise in connecting the dots of almost the kind of all the elements. And yeah, I'll just say one thing, there's definitely, Jay, sounds like your group was focused on something that we didn't get to. And so I would love to figure out a way after this workshop as to how we can support the energy managers on the call that we're struggling with allocating funds, and share some of those best practices and overcoming those barriers.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we'll be doing after this is, we'll put the recording of the webinar up on the Energy Manager learning platform, but we'll also be starting a forum thread to summarize some of the points that we covered in the different breakout rooms, so you can see what other breakout rooms discussed, but also as an opportunity within that thread on the forum to keep the discussion going and share, your tips, experiences, or challenges you're facing to keep it going after this workshop.
Now, just to make sure we finish on time, we're going to move on from sharing back what we learned, but I will be happy to stay after 12 if anybody wants to stick around and talk. I want to make sure that it's very clear, today we talked about strategic energy management as a proven framework for saving energy. And in 2023, the ISO will launch a strategic energy management program. So if you watch this space, when you see applications for that open up, then please get into it as you're able. It's going to deal with these components. It's going to help you through applying these components in what you do in your energy management. And it's going to mean that, the access to resources like what Jay was mentioning, recordings of our workshops, the online courses that we do, the tools are going to be available for you. So the website, speaking of that online forum, is emss.goldfin.ca. As Jay said, we're going to post the recording of today's workshop. Plus, there's going to be a forum thread so we can keep this discussion going on the forum. And you can see all of the different strategies and actions that people are going to take. We're also going to have a sector-based energy manager meetup on October 5th. So we have done meetups in the past. In this one, we're going to be dividing you up by sector into breakout rooms so you can talk about issues specific to your sector. Nick Brown, I saw you had your camera on for a little while. I know you're here. I know you're hearing me. I want you to go to that. But I know you're also, you told me you are going to go to that. So it's cool. We're committed. And everyone else, I would also love to see you here representing your sector and talk about what are the problems specific for your sector. Again, for anybody that didn't get any actions on their sheet today, talk to your energy coach. Some of these problems, as Ali was saying, are things that we got to think about and think through. And you can do that one-on-one with your energy coach or with your other energy manager peers. But I'd also tell you that an energy management assessment is a great thing that you can do quickly, and we can bring that to our coaching session so that we start off knowing where you're at and where the obvious next steps are. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar today. I really would appreciate it if you could use this QR code, scan it quickly with your phone. It takes just a minute to give us your feedback so that we can know how we did today and how we can make sure that every workshop that you attend after today is better. Because we don't just believe in continuous improvement in energy management. We believe in continuously improving our workshops so that you always get the best value. Please do that. It just takes a minute. It's really valuable for us and for the whole community here. I'm just going to be quiet while you do it.
Yeah, I was going to mention we're still got 3 minutes here, so there's really no excuse. It only takes 1 minute. You're still going to be wrapped up before the hour. So great job, Andrew, staying within the time to.
We got one more question, Nick.
Okay. All right.
But well, no, you can keep talking. That's fine. But just leave me time to ask this final question. I'm going to do another maybe 10 seconds so people can do the feedback form, and then I'll move to that final question. You can talk the whole remaining 3 seconds, Nick.
All right.
No, too late. You're up. Okay. The final question is also a Menti question. You answered a Menti question when you came in. We're going to get you to do one as you finish up today. But again, welcome to stay for more discussion afterwards. Your final question is, what are your actions? So you've hopefully documented a few actions, and hopefully some of you that didn't actually talk about them in your breakout room still thought of some actions. Let us know as you wrap up today's workshop and have them show up on the screen here. What are you going to do next? Somebody's going to conduct an energy hunt. Yes, yes. Please let us help you with that. We have a great package for setting people up to do an energy hunt and then summarizing the results.
I think a lot of people are still providing meaningful feedback on their survey forms.
Oh, I appreciate that so
we
much.
have one from Alan Sutton. He's going to let's see, tailored reporting to specific audiences. So he's going to develop some tailored reporting.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if I even would have mentioned the tailoring of your employee engagement to different audiences if I had not been prompted to do that by Kyle O'Hearn. I hope he's here. I hope he's proud that his point got into this. Getting executive commitment to energy reduction. Hey, you know what? That's a good action. It's not super easy and it takes time, but we also have tools and resources that can help with that. And I think that should be the starting point for anybody who's got anything indicating a lack of commitment.
And actually on that, we didn't get to it. We were talking about that, but one thing is identifying, that executive sponsor, that senior champion, to really promote these efforts. And if you're looking to engage them, we also have some resources, or happy to do a session on, what makes an effective executive sponsor and what should they be doing to really sort of drive change through the organization. Taking into account that they have limited time available, but there are some key actions that executive sponsors should be doing to promote energy efficiency through the organization. So happy to help out and provide some guidance with that. We have a little working session. It's a great one to go through with your senior champion or executive sponsor if you have one identified.
Somebody's saying working on establishing an energy team. I think that's a great action. Giorgio talked about wanting to leverage the successes that he had in compressed air leak management. And one of his next steps was working with his corporate communications person, right? Because, we're not all communications people, but when you need good communications to go out, then having a communications person who is at least a satellite member of your energy team is really great. And, we talked about how nobody can really do this on their own. So establishing an energy team, I'm very proud of anybody who's going to take that on. And if you don't have that, it is one of your barriers. Put it on your sheet. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to hit this carbon target by yourself.
Yeah, I also really like, in addition to establishing the energy team, I like that one and investigating the operational integration in more detail. And one of the things that we really see in organizations that are successful at achieving these goals and going even beyond their goals is that where it's, energy efficiency and, energy savings, emission reductions, it's not, one person or one department acting in isolation. It is something that, all the departments, parts within the organization, they do have a role to play in it. So getting that integrated through that and into those different operations in ways that make sense and in the ways that they contribute to those savings is hugely important for that, that significant long-term success.